Good evening, folks. It is Wednesday, October 29th. You're over the hump, and you are listening to the Empower Hour with me, Don Wyckoff. Now, if you didn't know, the purpose of this show is to teach people that it is never too late, and it's certainly never too early to make positive life changes, to take a different path, connect with your passions, and live this life to its fullest while staying true to who you are. Now, joining me tonight is founder, president, and CEO of Independent Living, Inc., Mr. Doug Hovey. And as the founder and CEO of Independent Living, Inc., Doug has built one of New York's most respected organizations for peer-driven support, accessible housing, employment services, and advocacy. A longtime leader in systems change, he helped pioneer the Consumer-Directed Personal Assistance Program, or CDPAP, and fought for the closure of segregated workshops, ensuring greater autonomy and opportunity for thousands across the state. His voice has been vital in advancing disability rights policy at every level, from grassroots campaigns to legislative hearings. Throughout his more than 40-year career, Doug has championed a model of leadership rooted in lived experience, mentorship, and practical action. Whether pushing for an accessible transportation, promoting employment opportunities, or training businesses to embrace inclusive practices, Doug's efforts have left an unmistakable mark on the landscape of disability rights in New York. And most recently, Doug was inducted into the New York State Disability Rights Advocacy Hall of Fame. And as an MC for the night, I was honored to be a part of that with you. How you doing, Doug?
Good, great, Don. It's great to be here on the show with you today. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, man. I see that you are a very busy man. You're actually at the Legislative Office building today, continuing your movements. How are things going up there?
Things are going well. In fact, I have a couple of meetings this afternoon with a couple of our local legislators. I'm excited about that. There's a lot going on, but right now, for the morning, I was attending the Disability Rights Employment Awareness Month Symposium,
Hmm.
which is going on now for a couple of years, and it's actually morphed into a two-day event. So this is day two of that. Yesterday was a packed house, and today was a packed house. So we had a great keynote presentation this morning by a woman who has Tourette's syndrome, and she talked about how, her personal experiences of overcoming the challenges that she had to face as a young child growing up, and getting through college and finding her passion and turning her perceived deficits into assets.
That's fantastic. So, well, that's one of my favorite things out of your bio is that, because really, man, I have ADHD, and I've always said it's been my superpower throughout my life. I was told I was a lot of problems when I was a kid because I had this diagnosis, but for me, it's been nothing but a superpower. So I'm glad that you have that understanding as well. Now, Doug, just so we can get a little more insight on your motivations, I wonder, like, what lived experiences did you encounter in your early life that would ultimately lead you to take on the crazy world of disabilities and advocacy?
That's a great question. And, my passion for disability services started long before I became disabled. In fact, as a young child, my mother worked for ARC, which at that time was called the Association for the Help of Retarded
That's
Children.
right.
Later, they changed it to the Association for the Help of Retarded Citizens. And but that organization at the time, and I'm talking a long time ago, in 1960s, I was just a little boy, and I would go to a program with my mom, on days that I was off from school or over summer vacations. And so my exposure to people with disabilities started at a very young age. And it was actually a very good thing because I just got to know folks by their first name and not by some diagnosis.
Yeah, yeah.
That was in my single digit years growing up, and then when I was in middle school, I volunteered periodically in different programs that supported students with disabilities. And then my mother also worked. My mother was a big sort of motivational factor behind me getting connected. I always blame her. I said, it's all your fault that I got involved with this disability stuff. But
Yeah, yeah.
when I was in middle school and junior high and high school, I volunteered in the school district working with young kids that had disabilities. And these are kids with very significant disabilities. Many were nonverbal and used mobility devices and things of that nature. And so I had a lot of early experience. And then, at the ripe age of 18, I became disabled as a result of a motorcycle accident. 3 weeks before I was supposed to go away to college out to Iowa, I was a wrestler in high school, and I had been accepted to a college in Iowa. And like I said, 3 weeks before I was supposed to get on that plane to go, I had a motorcycle accident, and it changed the entire, the trajectory of my life as I knew it at that time. I ended up in the hospital for 3 months, and and they said, congratulations, here's your wheelchair, get on with your life. And while I was in the hospital, I had one particular physician, and I will always remember this. One doctor who I just thought the world of, but I remember him saying these words to me, Don. Doug, don't burn the bridge to a quality of life. You can still have one. And I was like, wow. I mean, even when I think of that today, I get goosebumps,
That's great advice too, man. I mean, it takes somebody that's lived it though to understand that it's possible. And I find it fascinating anytime someone becomes disabled, how eye-opening the world becomes. I mean, how eye-opening it is to see what the world is really set up for. I mean, even as you were young and you had that early indoctrination into the world of disabilities and people with disabilities, I got to assume that there were things that you did not see coming and that you had to confront as if, I mean, it had to be crazy, right? Inaccessible everywhere.
Yeah, yeah. And even today, I mean, there are days when I wake up and shake my head and go, wow, and I do this like rapid review of my life and going back to my childhood and going through that period when I had my accident, and the meaning that has for me today is very different, I think, because it's one of the, I think, the greatest motivating factor that I have to want to do this kind of work, to do advocacy, to do systems change. And so, I went right to college after that experience. I remember I wanted to take a year off, and my parents said, no way, you're going to college, which was a good thing because I'm sure I would have faded away somewhere else. But, I went to college, graduated in 4 years, went on to get my master's degree. And, and I think timing was everything because independent living really fell into my lap. I had an opportunity to create one of 16 new centers out of 1986 legislation that created. There were already 12 centers, and I had gone out to visit several of them to learn about that. I was working at in another organization for about 6 months before I had this opportunity to develop independent living, which is the center that I have run since that time. And really, it gave me an opportunity. And I can remember saying, wow, this is great because it gave me a forum to turn my anger into advocacy. It sort of legitimized those feelings that we feel as people with disabilities in terms of, stigma, stereotype, marginalization, repression, discrimination, all of those things. What do you do with all that? Well, you join the movement, right? And the independent living movement is exactly a foundation for us to do that. It's a part of the bigger disability rights movement, and then of course it's connected to all of the movements that we see today. Whether we're talking about LGBTQ or people of color or the women's rights movement. We're all connected.
Mm-hmm.
So there's great power in numbers. I love the fact that we have 41 independent living centers in New York State. We have an amazing network. The New York Association on Independent Living, brings us all together as an amazing network. And we've really organized over the years, and I'm impressed. Having been here 38 years, I can sort of speak to the evolution of the independent living movement in New York State.
Yeah, that's really what I'm looking to grab too is, with almost 4 decades of this understanding, how much progression have you seen? Do you think it's moving along fast? I mean, I've been in it for 23 years, 30 in working with people with disabilities, 23 here at the Catskill Center. And while I would love to say, there have been a lot of advancements like Hava, I worked with Hava for a long time. Help America Vote Act, for those that don't know. And that opened my eyes because I was really blown away that I was spending so much time, 5 years, doing trainings for the Help America Vote Act with commissioners, election commissioners. And in my brain, I thought, well, they're election commissioners. They're commissioners. They're totally going to get this. But I spent more time teaching why to make these places accessible than how. I was blown away. And that became the antecedent for me to start a program called Through Children's Eyes, getting students to experience disabilities for an entire day. And we did a month-long program. And that ended up being one of the most powerful things that we had done so far, is taking third grade level kids, make them experience the disability for the entire day. And that was being blind, hard of hearing, having to have an aid if you had visual impairments. And if you were in the wheelchair for the day, you were in the chair all day. Even when you went to the bathroom, you had to navigate. This was such an eye-opening thing. It took these students from having sympathy to empathy. And that is where the real teacher is when you can actually feel this and understand why these rules, the ADA, ABA, all those things are in place. So what do you think for you? Have you seen like a real speed in the movement? Is it taken off more? Is it less? Because we're inundated with information all over the place. We now have the ability to do things like this and reach out and touch more people, but I'm still blown away myself at how many people just don't get it. What's your view?
Yeah, no, I think we're always going to experience that pendulum effect. A lot of it has to do with, politics, sadly, and who's in office and what decisions are made in Washington, what decisions are made in New York and each of the states' government systems. That has a lot to do with it. The ADA was obviously, the greatest piece of legislation that we've seen in our lifetime. And has made significant improvements. And I remember I went to a SUNY school in the 80s. Prior to the passage of the ADA, I became disabled 10 years before the ADA. I remember what a disaster it was to get around campus and what we had to do to make improvements, but we organized and we created a grassroots coalition on campus and started making recommendations and started doing crazy things like, if you signed up for a class that was inaccessible, the policy was they had to move the class. So we got a group of disabled students together. We would sign up for every class that was in an building or an environment, and we would drop out once they moved the class, and that was our way of making a statement about this is not right, and we got the attention of the president of the college, and she invited us into a series of meetings and discussions. And we were able to start making some incremental improvements. But I think, Don, over the years, we've seen many, many advancements and a greater recognition of people with disabilities. And yet every day I'm slapped in the face by something that, some barrier that you got to be kidding me,
That brings me up to one of my next questions. I know that you're known for helping to pioneer the consumer-directed personal assistance program. Currently, they're now moving that to one fiscal intermediary. And how do you think that's affected folks? Do you see that as a successful move, or do you think that caused some damage?
Yeah, no, infrastructure is so important to that program and any program, and particularly a program of that magnitude, right? This is probably the largest home care program in the country. And going from 600 provider organizations that supported this regionally, and having that local connection with consumers and workers, the infrastructure has broken down. There's a broken infrastructure right now. PPL is attempting to develop their systems in a way that can support the size and the magnitude of this. I don't think it's the right plan. We're living centers. We are trying on a daily basis to make things work, but I think we have to, realize that this is not the right infrastructure, and long-term sustainability under this system is not going to work. So, I think we've got to make some changes. And, we have some ideas about that we have attempted to present to the DOH and have conversations about. But I think the governor's pretty insistent on sticking and trying this, one provider for the entire state. I think it's absolutely ludicrous and
Okay,
crazy.
thank you. Because, yeah, I really thought this was a complete disaster of a decision. I know for folks that don't understand the Consumer Directed Personal Assistance Program, can you explain a little bit about why is that important to the individual that's receiving the care? Why is this program important?
So let me tell you, Don, back in the 1990s, prior to 1995, which is when the legislation was passed, right? Chapter 81 of the laws of 1995 that ratified the program in state law. There were some demonstrations going on. The Independent Living Center in Utica at the time had a pilot project. There was another organization down in New York City had a pilot, but there was a group of us in New York that got together, a small group. There might have been 10 of us, and said, we really need to develop this program here in New York State. We need to make this available to everyone that wants to be in consumer directed. So consumer directed allows you to recruit, hire, and train your own workers. Right. So, and people sometimes will ask me, well, what do you mean? Where's the professional involved? And I use myself as an example. If I need home care, I'm the best person to decide what that scope of work needs to be and when I need those services.
And who provides it?
And who provide? I should be, right. I don't want an agency to pick somebody and send them to me that I may or may not like. And I don't want somebody who was trained somewhere else to help me with my specific and unique needs. So the consumer-directed model, again, introduced about 30 years ago in New York, allowed the flexibility of people with disabilities to choose their own care plan and what that looked like. It really got co-opted, I would say, around 2014 and 15. When the managed care companies got involved. That's when the program got sort of hijacked, if you will, by managed care companies and by these large for-profit corporations. I mean, I don't know if you're aware, but there are large for-profits that were dominating as much as 50% of the entire population. I think there were just literally three organizations that dominated 50% of the 280,000 people. And then the rest were distributed amongst the remaining, 597 fiscal intermediaries or provider organizations. It was just absolutely crazy. And we warned the Medicaid director back in 2017 and 2018. We had a series of meetings with, at the time, it was Donna Frescator. And we explained that the program is, and at that time, there were only about 75,000 people. This is, 7-8 years ago. And, you fast forward to 2024, 2025, and they reported that there were over 250,000 people in the program. And that's all because of managed care and this sort of these not-for-profit corporations that are backed by large hedge fund companies and financial institutions that got into the business because they saw this as a revenue generator, not as a service that people with significant disabilities need and depend on every day to live their lives. So now, sadly, tens of thousands, if not more people, their lives are at risk right now, and they're threatened with. So many people have lost their workers to other types of jobs in the community. There's a wage parity issue, no doubt. That's been ongoing for several years. And then, of course, there's this issue of lack of service, people not being able to get into the system, people not getting their paychecks. The system is just completely broken down. And
this government shutdown has not helped anything.
No, it doesn't. No, not naturally that doesn't. But I mean, even before the government shutdown, this is an isolated situation, where we have a home care consumer-directed home care program that has just been annihilated.
And I know this was the idea was to curb corruption, ironically, and to save the state money. But I think one of the biggest problems that I've had with this is that it's I've literally watched, here on the ground level, we get those calls from frantic consumers that are saying my aide can't come to work anymore because they're not receiving their paycheck. This transition has changed the way that the billing coding and all that kind of stuff has happened, and that all that convolution has made it impossible for one company to be able to take this monstrosity on and coordinate it with any kind of good detail or the focus on the consumer. Again, I think we're losing, not us, but I think they're losing the focus of what this whole program was about. It was to ensure that people would have, like you said, the right, the autonomy to decide who, what, when, and where they were going to receive these services. And if you're going to bring them into the house, this also opened up the opportunity for family members, right, to be paid to be able to help take care of their family. I mean, it made such great economic sense as far as to the direct family and their family members. To undo this was just appalling. And we still are getting calls. I know that they've said they've hammered a lot of this out. I saw PPL put out this big thing saying, we're on it, we're working on it, but we're still getting calls of people that aren't getting paid, people that have been left alone in home who had needed, if not 24-hour care, full day care to get through their days, and people aren't coming to work. And that is deadly. And I don't think most of the folks listening know about that or how much that will affect them should they become part of that. What's your insight on that?
Well, clearly the infrastructure has to change. It's not going to get better long term. The program is just going to get so watered down and ineffective, and we're going to lose, quality of life, right? Number one. And the independent living centers, we're always focused on the consumer first.
Mm-hmm.
You come to a meeting with traditional providers, and the first thing they want to talk about is revenue.
That's right.
And good, bad, or indifferent. We actually come to the table. We think it's good. We talk about consumer quality of life as a driving force, and when we started this program, that's what it was all about. I remember, back in 1996, when the program first got started, hearing the report from the Department of Health. We had a great relationship with the Department of Health at that time, and they would provide us with monthly numbers, data of the number of people in the program. And I remember when they said, Don, there's 3,278 people in the program, and we were like, wow, 3,000. We thought that was great. Look at that. That's incredible,
Yeah.
And at that time, there were maybe 26 provider organizations in the entire state, right? And then, those numbers kept growing and growing and growing. And then, I remember when it got to 30,000, we thought, well, that's awesome. People with very significant disabilities, directing their own home care. This is awesome, and it was a real meaningful program. And then it continued to grow. And as I said, it wasn't until, 2014 when managed care got involved and these large for-profit corporations, we warned the State Department of Health at that time that there should be a moratorium on new fiscal intermediaries at that time. And I would say at that time, there was probably maybe 150 at the time. When we finally realized the numbers are starting to get too big, and we don't need too many, and of course it grew to, they claim 600, and now they want to go to one. It's just, yeah, it makes no sense. It's mind-boggling, and it consumes a lot of our time, sadly.
Yeah, it really does. I swear we can get one legislative win and we're backed up by two others that change the direction in another angle. So we're just constantly fighting in the wind. That's what it feels like. And, I'm not discouraged because I know what we're up against and I've always known. And I feel, it's good to be a part of this and try to do all we can to do things differently. For me, It's been about in educating young kids to understand these problems now. Because what I find fascinating, Doug, is this: there are 61 million people now with disabilities in the United States. 43% by the age of 65 identify as people with disabilities. With odds, that's 1 in 4, by the way. So with odds like that, why is this not in education from early years on? Why are we not doing that? That is crazy to me. Do you know of any educational things that are looking to be implemented in anything from school curriculum or anything like that to help? Because I feel like the young generation coming up who are voting will never really be voting on issues like this because they have no understanding of how it will affect them or their family members. So it's kind of, we're stuck in this, oh, it's red team, blue team, whatever, my team against your team, without looking at any of the actual facts of the parties and what they're fighting for or against. So for me, I'd love to see an education component come in. Is there anything happening in that regard? And would you be willing to work on one if there was?
I would love to work on one. In fact, here at the Disability Rights Employment Awareness Month, the Dream event that I'm at today, they're actually doing a workshop right now on youth development and introducing younger people into this social movement. And the importance of doing that, and it's great when you hear a presentation about that. But I don't know of a lot of good stuff that's happening in the school systems to embrace that. I know the independent living centers in their own respective areas do some work with students and do some presentations and try to connect with students with disabilities at an early age. But I don't think it's done in a formal or concerted fashion. I think it's done sort of just individually by center. So it would be wonderful to see a more organized approach to this. I know that OBWDD has the Self Advocacy Association, and Don, as well as I do, the unfortunate reality in New York State is that we have so many silos, right? And these state agencies they'll push back when I say this, and they always do, but they really don't talk to each other.
That's true.
Oh yeah, we have a conversation every now and again, but there's no meaningful integration. And at the end of the day, I don't care what your diagnosis is. We all face stigma, stereotype, repression, discrimination, marginalization. All of those apply to all of us as people with disabilities, youngsters, students with disabilities, to come out and to learn more about the movement. But we also we have an obligation to help them seek career opportunities in disability rights too, and I don't think we've done a good job of that.
I agree. I do have an idea that I would love to run by you. It's not an idea. It's actually something we've implemented for 17 years. It made it into the National Council on Social Studies. There's been a book written about the program, and that was through Children's Eyes. And again, what we were doing there isn't going in and just saying, hey, my name's Don, I have a disability, life sucks, and go out. They're not going to get anything from that. At most, sympathy, right? But we decided, and it was after the Hovey legislation, after training for 5 years and trying to figure out why are these people not understanding this right that people have and not wanting to help. I couldn't get it, man. So I figured, you know what? You can't teach an old dog new tricks, but you can teach their puppies. So if we could take these kids, so what we did is we formulated a program of an experiential model based on the Dewey model of experiential learning, right? And so we literally, like I said, put these kids in a wheelchair for an entire day. That was recess, rec, lunchtime. We had them write a before essay of what they thought about people with disability after their experience. It was a profound difference in their essays afterwards. But what we found most impressive was, without being asked, these kids wanted to know, well, who can we talk to about making the lunchroom accessible and the playground accessible? Because they were just coming off the idea that it's not fair that I can't sit with my friends on my day in the wheelchair, or it's not fair that I can't push the door open as a child into an accessible bathroom. It's not fair, these things. And that predicated this whole thing where we taught them how to do a basic on-site assessment with vertical rises, clear widths, things like that. but not just to teach them, because now they understood. Now they knew why these things were. And it worked so well that after the first year, I had parents calling me and going, I guess I need an on-site of my house. Apparently, it's not accessible, and my kids are freaking out right now because they were going home and going, "Hey, yeah, what are you going to do if this happens? Because I can tell you from my experience that that is not going to work, and you won't be able to do this, and you won't be able." It was very clear to them, and it's such an impressionable age that they were able to write our Senate and Congress to get the Disability History Initiative bill, which was in like 2007 or 8. I don't remember which. These kids sent off their video of them experiencing this experience, their ideas, and they pushed for legislation that ultimately passed. And the senators were sending them glossy pictures with signatures saying, because of your grassroots efforts. These are third grade students. Doug, we had a component of that program where we asked the students to come up with any invention that would overcome whatever limitations you may have experienced on your day. These kids, third grade level, again, were coming up with things like, I know you'll know what I'm talking about when I say the iBot 2000, right? The chair that could climb stairs. These kids were already conceptualizing, why can't we make the chair do that up the steps? Why can't we raise it up in the air so they can reach it? They were coming up with things. They were gave a simple question to these kids, and they came up with real deal working ideas. I think we underestimate our youth, and I think if we could get into these schools, and what we found was this was right at the height of Common Core. And of course, we got the whole pushback of, now we've been doing disability rights and etiquette kind of thing, trainings. But like I said, that's sympathy. You don't get empathy unless you experience it. So we did that program, and as a result of that, it started to expand, and we started getting other counties to do it. We got other states involved in doing it, but there's no cohesive to be able to get it locked in. And where we found that disconnect was in Common Core curriculum. And so we heard that and decided, okay, well, we'll can this program and make sure that it is connected to every part of that curriculum that is required, because there's no reason, because that just really underscored the problem. They looked at it and said, no, we have regular teaching to do. We can't be integrating this stuff into it because we have this Common Core regimented stuff here. Oh, so what you're saying is kids with disabilities have no right to learn these things. Are you kidding me? So we connected it to curriculum, and then it was accepted, and it has been in every school. I would love to see a bigger move to maybe can that, maybe talk with you, work with some of the people you know, or maybe you could steer me in the right directions to make this something we present to the state education department for inclusion into curriculum.
Yeah, and a big part of that, what I found to be very empowering and powerful, is that when you identify students with disabilities in that same school district, these are peers now. You're talking about coming in and talking to the classroom and giving them an opportunity to, again, as I always say, turn their perceived deficits into assets. And, hey, Doug, or Johnny, tell a story about your wheelchair. How does your wheelchair work? And Johnny gets up there and tells the whole class about his wheelchair, and the kids are like, oh, cool. And they start asking all these questions.
That's the thing. We demystified and normalized people with disabilities throughout that process. That's what we really learned.
Right. And we did a program years ago. It was funded by the Youth Bureau. The Orange County Youth Bureau gave us funding to do a program called Everything You Wanted to Know About Disabilities But Were Afraid to Ask. Okay. Mm-hmm. And this was something we went into, I think it was 12 or 13 school districts, and provided these sort of educational experiences for kids. But one of the requests that we had was, we need students with disabilities to participate in this.
Yeah.
These kids in school are like, oh yeah, I see him. He goes down the hallway all the time, but I never told him. So this was an opportunity to learn directly from other students with disabilities in their own school system.
That's what we found too. There were students with disabilities that were in there, and they got an opportunity to, like you said, to really work within their peer group and have a better understanding of who they were. What we found was a lot of the students, the younger kids, when we had them write the pre-essay on what they thought about people with disabilities, their parents had said stuff like, Don't talk to them. Don't ask them what's the matter. They don't want you to do that kind of stuff. They don't want, shh, you know, that kind of stuff. And afterwards, these kids were outraged. They were really upset at the fact that, you know, because they had felt all of those, you know, lack of integration into the setting of their playground or their lunch line or things like that. And they were upset. Now they were looking at the students with disabilities and saying, hey, that's not fair. And they're taking them under their wing. I mean, these kids were writing to the electronic door company because they had a door put in so that it would be panel assisted so that somebody could do that, because we had somebody come in that was quadriplegic and had no ability to open the doors. He waited there, had to have somebody ring the door, and they were outraged. They were mad for him. To see that, we actually had students that went out and confronted police officers who parked in the accessible parking spaces when they came to the school, and the kids seen it. So that happened more than once. They created a disability awareness parking ticket. It wasn't a ticket, but it was basically to inform them what they were doing. And these kids were going out at 9 years old, Doug, and confronting police officers to say, you don't have a disability. Why would you be parking in there? Of course, the police officer said, well, I'm here on official business and nobody's there. But how do you know somebody's not going to come? They were asking the right questions. They were upset for the right reasons. I love this program, and I would love to see it take off and be bigger, because we also have found that some of those students, we're talking 17 years, they are now in college. And after I was able to speak with them, how much they had remembered from, you know, path of travel widths and things like that, that they still stuck in their head. They're the future developers. They're the future. So shouldn't we be teaching them what we now know is a big problem in the United States?
Exactly. And when you cited the statistics before, 61 million and growing, right?
One in four.
I remember when that number was, 48 million.
And 54. Yeah, I remember too, man. Yeah. It's just
people are living older, people are living longer. And, and we have to be very concerned about our treatment of the older population. I mean, if you look at New York State agency infrastructure, you've got the Office of Mental Health, right? They're like $10 billion organization, 10 billion with a B. And then you've got OPWDD, another approximately $10 billion. And then you have the Office of Children and Family Services. I don't know, what are they, 8 or 9 billion? And then you have NYSOFA, the New York State Office for the Aging. And I don't know, what are they? They're a fraction of that, right? And, I'm concerned about the lack of support and attention being provided for the aging population to assist them to continue to live in the community. Too many people are ending up where they don't want to be, in a nursing facility. And, I know the most integrated setting coordinating council is working on the Olmsted plan. And I try to keep reminding the group, and as do my colleagues from the independent living centers, that, nursing homes are the biggest institutions that we have. And we really need to wrap them down, sure, provide a better quality of life for them while folks are wherever they happen to be. But at the end of the day, people want to be in their homes, and we need a better system to respond to people when they're aging and they end up in the hospital, and the hospital wants to get them out of the hospital, so they send them to a nursing facility. That's not acceptable.
That just happened to my mother.
It should not be an acceptable discharge, unless it was truly for like that 3-week, PT thing. And while that 3-week PT thing is going on, they should be modifying the house to make it accommodating to meet the person's needs, right? But we don't think like that.
No, we don't. We don't. And I've done a lot of trainings with discharge planners of hospitals and PTOT, and I'd say, listen, if you guys know that you're going to tell someone, hey, you're going to need a hip replacement or a knee replacement, it is that day that you need to tell them that discharge planners at the PT or the nursing home or wherever they end up are going to require an accessible entrance into this home because of fire egress, all these kind of issues. And they're going to ask you if that's happening. And if it's not, that's not a safe discharge. And then what does that set up? It's now either you, A, sit in that nursing home you did not want to go to, had no warning you would be held in, or B, sign out against medical advice, which screws up the whole medical billing stuff. So should you get out and you have another incident, it's not going to be covered until that coding is fixed and you're back into community Medicaid or insurance. It's nuts, man. My mom just went in. She had two knees done. Her second knee was an issue. They go to her insurance and they say, well, she had this digestive issue that kept her in longer. So she was doing less of the PT, not strong enough to get up. So they just said, okay, you know what? We're going to send you to a highly skilled PT so that you can get therapy, intensive therapy. That was what they told her. Then they called the places and they said, no, your insurance won't cover that. It won't even show. I'll tell you where it will cover. And they sent her to a nursing home. They left her in a diaper, and my mom saw them maybe once or twice a day during the meds. I mean, none of the stuff that was promised. Now, we know that, but most of today's society has zero understanding of that. And the saddest thing is the people we're talking about are the people that built the goddamn community you're living in right now, folks, right? These are the people who built what we live in now. And the way we thank them is this. It's disgusting. So let me ask you this, Doug. You're up at the LOB right now. What could the average person do to do something about this? How could they join the fight? What could they do?
Yeah. Oh, I mean, there's an organized network, again, through the New York Association on Independent Living. Find out what their advocacy agenda is. Go to Albany, meet with the legislature, your local folks, meet them in the local district office and meet them here in Albany. But you've got to frame your issues and take your campaign to Albany. And education, awareness, talk about it. Start the fire, stop bitching, start a revolution, right? I mean, that's really what happens. I mean, look at the Caring Majority, an amazing organization, grassroots organization that has been doing tremendous advocacy work in New York State and their larger network across the country. But that's a real grassroots advocacy organization. And I'm always so impressed with Alana Berger and Julia Solo in particular, two leaders of the Caring Majority who've done so much work on behalf of the home care crisis.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much to do. You've got to pick out what your issues are.
I know there is so much. And maybe that's where a lot of my discouragement comes from. Because, of course, in an ILC, being, funded as we aren't as much as we need to be, you wear a lot of hats. And because of those different hats, you start to see new areas I didn't even recognize. I mean, I was with, I'm a code enforcer. I've done architectural barrier consultation and that kind of stuff for years. But then I started getting over into the social care network side of things and starting to see, oh my God, there's so much work to do. And for those that are listening, if you're thinking, yeah, that's those people, that's not me. Know this, Doug did not think that this disability was going to happen, I am sure. And as with most people, when you are in your shower or in your bathroom, covered naked in bubbles, that's one of those places that makes disability happen quick, and it happens to anybody. No one is exempt. So if you concerned with the idea of you ending up in a nursing home or you having some stranger change your attends or shower you or do any of those things, think ahead now and know that your voice can be heard. You can do something about this, and you can join people like Doug Hovey. And if you wanted to do that, you could reach out to Doug at myindependentliving.org, right? Is that the address there?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, because man, I don't know what my legacy is, but I'm honored to be able to have, Hall of Fame, inductees come onto the show and share what your 40 years has shown you. What I see in you is that you're still fired up, man. You're still making moves. You're stopping to take a radio interview on a Zoom call in a hallway while legislating and doing all of that. What keeps you going, man? What keeps you motivated?
Hey, Don, another good important statistic to remember is that only 15% of people with disabilities are born with their disability. So, the point you were making before is anyone can join this club at any time, and it's not something you expect to happen. I was 18 years old, and did not expect to have a motorcycle accident and change the entire trajectory of my life. But I love my work. It's really turning, passion and advocacy into action, really. I tell my kids all the time, my two favorite days of the week are Mondays and Fridays. Mondays because I get up and I get to do what I love, and Fridays because I get to go home and do what I love, spend time with my family.
That's excellent, man. I mean, seriously, that is the secret to success. I tell everyone my idea of success is waking up in the morning, going to bed at night, and doing everything I love in between. And that's my idea of success. It's not tied to monetary bounds. I understand that legacy matters. And what I would like from you, because all of these recordings will ultimately go, I forgot the name of the center in Long Island. Do you remember? It's not the Varwick Center for the Hall of Fame.
Silo, or is it Lysil?
Say the first one again.
Silo?
Nope. I thought it was like Varwick or something like that center. Anyways,
Yes, the Varick Center. Yes,
that's where they're going to have the Hall of Fame, and people are going to be able to visit that. And what we're going to do is include every one of these interviews below the picture and award, so that they can scan it, listen to your audio, you telling about your life and your story. What message would you love to tell the future advocates?
Yeah, I mean, always, build coalitions, organize, develop your agenda, and frame your presentations and take them somewhere. But, take them to Albany, take them to Washington. But I think that grassroots coalition building is just so essential, and it really needs to start at a young age. So anything we can do to identify students in our school systems, students with disabilities, who can be the future leaders. We really have to start thinking about that. And I'm 38 years into the movement since I started in 1987, and and I'm thinking about, wow, where are all the future leaders? And there's some coming up. It's nice to see, but I think we all individually and as individual independent living centers all need to do more to identify those future leaders. That's what's essential.
Yeah, and that lines up exactly with my sentiment that we need to start something that is brought into New York State education curriculum. That because again, with 1 in 4, 61, 1 in 4, man, think about that. If you were going to play the lottery and you had a 1 in 4, you'd play it every day. If you had a 1 in 4 chance of dying in a surgery, you'd be writing your will up and saying goodbye to everybody. So how this is not being taught from early on, just forget. Look, of course we want, the respect, and we want to be able to do etiquette and teach people how to talk. But once these people experience it at such a young age, and you actually feel this empathetically, you don't need to be told how to be etiquette, because you've lived it, you feel it, you know it, now you understand. One of the biggest things that always got me was the kids would be like, my legs are cold. And you would see these kids in there, like nine years old, with blankets on their legs. Like, think about that. You like always saw the grandma doing that. Grandpa always had the blanket. Why was that? Well, now they know their legs were going to sleep. Their butt fell asleep. It was an eye-opening thing. And I think we really got to move in that direction. I hope that I can work with you somehow in the future to, whether it's to organize another grassroots thing to get educators, teachers that are fired up, that want to join the movement, to be able to make sure that this is part of curriculum. Yeah, Christopher Columbus and that whole history stuff. Yeah, that's great. But how pertinent is that to a living person today in the United States? It's time to change.
Yeah, Don, and maybe you can be instrumental in helping to coordinate that powerful video message that can be played in every school district. Every school system would play this sort of message for students. And
that's a great idea.
Students with disabilities to talk about this advocacy movement and, help students understand that there are career opportunities in social movements.
And that's a thing. I think, some of the kids that were in those younger grades, and like I said, 17 years later, I've seen some of them, a couple of them in the college setting, and they were more aware of what is required, for just accessibility alone, that when you're going to be a contractor, you already know, you're already thinking universal design concepts, you know what I mean? So if we start young and once they're aware, wow, they're going to see it a lot longer as they get older, they're going to see that all the way through their life and realize the importance of it and the ultimate determination of where people end up if we don't do something about it.
Yeah.
Crazy, crazy. So I'm really honored to have you on, Doug. I think I'm not sure when the episode will go out. I do want to do some editing. I'll talk to you about that later. I'm probably going to ask you to come back on again for a couple of questions. It won't be a whole hour long, but if you'd be willing to do that, I would appreciate it. And we'll get that or have you come into the studio. That would be awesome too. So
Yeah, let me know how the sound quality is, and I can certainly be at my desk next time. I apologize for.
Hey, it is what it is. It just helps to underscore what you do and how focused and how much movement you put into this. This isn't something you talk. This is something you live. Doug Hovey, it's been an honor to have you on, sir. It was an honor to induct you into the Disability Rights Advocacy Hall of Fame. I wish you continued success. And if there's anything that you would ever like to come on, talk about, get out on the radio or on my podcast, please just contact me and I'd be happy to set that up.
Great, Don. And thanks for all that you do. Really appreciate your work.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Doug Hovey, thank you so much, man. Have a great day and good luck today in Albany.
Thank you.